think of our Constitution as a genetically engineered seed. All right? 3 branches, federal to state level, 10 amendments, tying it all up. But what do you do with seeds? You plant it in soil. Question, does the type of soil you plant the seed in have any relation to the harvest? Well, yeah, if you take that seed and plant it in a parking lot with gravel, it's not going to grow. So we go to Iraq. We get rid of Saddam Hussein. We give him a constitution nearly identical to ours, but it's a Muslim population. And in one election cycle, they vote in Sharia law, where it's the death penalty to leave Islam and you can beat your wife. And we're like, what happened to the seed? It didn't have the same harvest as it did in America. Well, you planted it in an Islamic soil. They don't believe in equality. We get rid of the Berlin Wall goes down, and there's former Soviet states, and we help give them constitutions very similar to ours. And in one generation, they get taken over by the mafia, the black market, the organized crime, and we're like scratching our heads thinking, how come that seed had a different harvest? Well, you planted it in an atheistic soil, right? They had 70 years of communism with atheism plowed into the soil, and atheism says this life is all there is, do whatever you can to get ahead. But you take that seed and you plant it in a Judeo-Christian soil in America, where we believe everybody's made in the image of God, he's not a respecter of persons, so we're all equal, and that seed brings forth a harvest of the most prosperous country with the most individual freedom and liberty that planet Earth has ever seen. Wow. And so why do we want a country with few external laws? Means we need to have more internal laws. What motivates us to follow these internal laws is you're accountable to God. These are concepts that we learn from history. One of the other interesting things I found is I decided I would go back and research every single century of recorded human history. It took me a couple of years. I read through, the ancient Babylonians and the ancient Persians and the Elamites and the Syrians and the Neo-Assyrians and the Egyptians and all the 25 different dynasties of Egypt. And but one of the things that stood out to me was that writing was invented around 3300 BC. Human beings writing down human records, it gets traced to about 3300 BC. And we're not talking, handprints on a cave wall. We're talking about a language with writing. And so Sumerian cuneiform, you take a stick, poke it in clay, right? And so there's around 3300 BC to today, and I usually round it out to 4000 BC because many of the founding fathers use the quote of saying 6,000 years of recorded human history. And so recorded human history is human beings keeping records. So if there's 6,000 years of human beings writing down human records, 3,000 of those is in the book of Genesis. Half of human history is in the book of Genesis, right? And so now you've got 30 centuries that, you can divide up. And really, once you learn what happens in a century, it doesn't change. And so then you begin to learn what happened in the 6th century, in the 7th century. And then as you begin to color it in, it's like color by number, you begin to recognize human history. You see the picture of it. And from most of world history, it's top down, ruled by kings and pharaohs and Caesars. Human life is of little value. When Egyptians believed in eternal life, but it was only for the pharaoh. And the common people didn't get eternal life. But if you could get buried with the pharaoh in the pyramid, you were like in. And so they would want to be buried with the pharaoh in these funeral processions. The same thing in China, and when Genghis Khan dies and they divert a river and they bury him in the river, and then they kill everybody that had a part in the funeral procession. But human life is valued very low. But it was the Judeo-Christian concept that your life is precious, that you are made in the image of God, and that this God is not a respecter of persons, so we're all equal. And so we need to realize that wherever there's tolerance in America, it's because of the Judeo-Christian faith that there's tolerance, right? America was not founded by Muslims trying to figure out how to tolerate non-Muslims. It wasn't founded by atheists who wanted to tolerate non-atheists. It wasn't tolerated by, Satanists who wanted to tolerate non-Satanists. No, it was founded by Christians that didn't get along. And they learned how to tolerate each other. First Protestants, then Catholics, and they tolerated Jews, then they tolerated monotheists and polytheists. Finally went out to tolerate the secularists and the Islamists and the Satanists, and now the last ones in want to kick the first ones out. But I talk about that in a book called Backfired. A nation born for religious tolerance no longer tolerates the religion of its founders.